Are we on?
Yes, we are on. Good morning again, everyone, and welcome to the first seminar of the day, the information seminar. There's two today. Alzheimer's Otago is first up with Julie Pickford, and later on MS is going to have a wee talk to anybody who's interested. So the Neurological Foundation is concerned with raising money for research, and that's what we do. We do a little bit of education, but we mainly raise money for research. The other support organisations like Alzheimer's, these are the people who are at the coalface. They're out in the field talking to people with neurological diseases and with their support and with their spouses and families. And we've got a difficult job, but I think in some ways theirs is more difficult. So it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce Julie to you. There will be time for some questioning afterwards, I feel sure. And so please welcome Julie Pickford.
Thank you, Roland. I haven't got any technology on me, and I thought, well, it'll be good because there'll be no problems. And of course, the first problem was I've got nothing to stick the microphone on, so that's not a good start. So I just thought I'd just talk a wee bit about the Alzheimer's Society. It was formed back in 1982, and it was purely run by, can you hear me? Yeah. Purely run by volunteers until 1994, and that's when the funding came through for the field worker, the first field worker that was ever employed. So we're largely funded by donations, and we have to go for grants like all non-for-profit organisations do, and we do get a small amount from the government, which is for my wages. We also have an appeal day once a year, and around that appeal day, well, it's appeal week, but we do have a day that we put the tins out on the main street. But at that time, we have what we call Cuppa for a Cause, and that's whereby rest homes and hospital care facilities put on an afternoon or morning tea for the families and residents, and people that come pay for their morning tea. They pay for their cup of tea and whatever they have, and that money comes to the organisation. So my role is mainly to look after the people that care for the person with the memory problem. I take support groups. The aim is to make a better life for all people affected by dementia, to raise government and community awareness, both for the carer and the person with the memory problem. So we look after their needs, to advocate for better services, and to provide as much updated information as possible. I only work part-time. I work 25 hours, which is not a lot considering the area that I have. So I cover from Palmerston down to Clinton and through to Tapanui, and we also have a field worker in North Otago and one in Central, and they're not actually funded by the government. So a profile of a carer, so I just thought this was quite interesting information, about 3/4 are female, the average age is around 60, 3/4 of the person that's doing the caring lives with the person with the memory problem. Half of them also work outside of the house, and sometimes obviously they have to stop work or reduce hours to care for that person with memory problems. On an average of 73 hours per week is spent providing care, and about 2/3 of the people cannot be left on their own for safety reasons, and a lot of those people are unable to do daily tasks such as toileting, bathing, dressing. About 1/3 receive no help from family or friends, and 56% of all carers will suffer from moderate to severe depression compared to just 8% of non-carers. That's huge. And just some facts on dementia: 1 in 20 people over the age of 65 will have memory problems. 1 in 5 over the age of 80, and 1 in 3 over the age of 85. And to just bear in mind that Alzheimer's is not, it's not, well, I mean, the older we live, the more likely it is that we're going to get memory problems, but it's not part of ageing, it's not part of the ageing process. And it's estimated by 2026 that 75,000 people in New Zealand will have dementia, and by 2050 150,000. So that's a bit scary. 46 people in New Zealand a day are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and around the world 1 person every 7 seconds is diagnosed. And this was the most recent research I could find, but back in 2008, it was estimated financial cost to New Zealand for people with dementia was $713 million. So the definition of a carer is anyone who supports someone that has ill health, a disability, mental illness, addiction, or someone in older age. Stats on general caring, this not specific to memory, this isn't, but a wellbeing and learning survey undertaken back in 2011 by, this was Carers New Zealand, showed that 26% were caring for more than 1 person, and 46% of all carers of all age reported a health or disability that they had themselves. And 35% of carers had some sort of, that had sustained an injury due to caring for that person. So that would either be back, or, which was the most common, pulled muscles in the back due to lifting. So what does it mean to be a carer? In fact, I was just talking to some of my carers out there, and they said, I've come to listen to the talk, and I thought, you know everything. They're experts. They know what it's like. But there are costs and benefits for being a carer, and some of the benefits include the enrichment of relationships through closeness and companionship from caring for that person. The carers take great satisfaction in caring for the person with the memory problem, and fulfilling what they may see as a natural role of being a spouse or friend or family member, and to the power to make a real difference in that person's life. Because without a carer, often those people do have to go into residential facility. But there are costs involved as well, and the carer may experience financial or social loss, the loss of sense of normality, the loss of power and control, and the loss of privacy. And although the person that's doing the caring, they know that they need support workers to come into their homes, but one person told me one day that they felt that their house had become like a ward of a hospital, just with all the people that were coming and going. So they do recognise that they need that help from outsiders, but you imagine those people coming into your house all the time. Loss of freedom and spontaneity, personal time, and even loss of identity. And I hear that a lot, like people in the group, my support group, say, I'm just a carer, that's what I do, I care. They don't see themselves as anything else but a carer. And maybe the loss of a relationship of the person that they're caring for. It sounds a bit all doom and gloom, doesn't it? But it's not. Commonly discussed issues for carers is, the most common is stress and frustration. It's reported for caring for people, and this is contributed by the challenges associated with caring with someone with memory problems. And worrying over financial and legal matters is a real concern for a lot of these people. And I've only been in this role for 2 years, so I'm relatively new, but in that time there has been a lot of young people coming through, and young I mean like in their 50s and early 60s. In fact, a scary thing happened the other day. I opened the mail and got a referral for someone that was younger than me, was born in 1960, and I sort of looked and thought, So, and as a result of that, these people sometimes have to leave their employment because they're no longer able to hold down their job. So not only is it financially like the household becomes burdened because that person with the memory problems has to leave work, but often the person that's doing the caring has to leave to care for that person. The other thing too is power of attorney costs quite a lot of money to get done these days, and older people, if you leave it until you're older and they've only got the super coming in, it can be quite a financial burden to get that document in place, but it is extremely important to have that. Fear of what will happen in the future, and I often get people coming into my office or ringing and saying, what's going to happen? Well, no one knows what's going to happen. No one, even if you haven't got memory problems, no one knows what's down the road for us. They also have concerns about if something happened to them, what would happen to that person that they're caring for, and I'll talk a bit about that later. So the needs of the person that's actually doing the caring is often put by the by, and they put the needs of the person that they're caring for first. And someone told me once that it was a worker from Carers Society, that if the oxygen mask in the plane comes down, God forbid, but if it ever did come down, the hostess always says to put it on you first, so to look after yourself first, and that makes a lot of sense because you can't look after anybody else if you're not getting the oxygen. So this was a statement from a carer. She said, it wasn't until recently that somebody actually asked me how I was, and I felt overwhelmed by the concern shown, and I burst into tears, realising then how much stress I was harbouring inside, and being able to talk about it to an outside person is so helpful to release some of that pressure. So, these carers, they're so involved and so overwhelmed by caring for that person. Often they're forgotten. So this person was just asked how they were feeling, and it was just all too much. So a lot of the time carers often don't recognise that they have needs themselves. They're too busy attending to the person. Now, I just wanted to talk about carer support. This is an allocation of care that comes from the ministry, and carer support is allocated to keep the situation at home sustainable, and it's to give that person support, basically, to give them a break. And this can be used in many ways, but most commonly the person that has the memory problems goes into care and gives that carer a break. And this would be a nice place to go for some carer support. And it's important to use that carer support. That's what it's there for. It's to give you a break. And people often say to me, if I get desperate, or if something happens and I need to use it, or if I get really that I need a break, I'll give you a ring. But it's not about that. It's before you get desperate. So it's to recharge your batteries and to be able to keep going. And this is as true as I'm standing here. Last week I had been to see a man. He looked dreadful. He had an allocation of something like 100 days carer support for his wife. They'd been married for 60 years, and I said I'd never put her into care, and because I talked about having a break. And he'd been getting angina, and the very next day he ended up being rushed to hospital with a heart attack, and his wife had to go into urgent respite, and it was just such a mess. But if he'd taken that carer support earlier and had a break, maybe that could have been avoided. I was going to talk a bit about support groups, and they're not for everybody. But my support groups, I run one at Community House, which is on the corner of Great King Street and Moray Place, and I also run one out at Mosgiel. And support groups are, as I say, they're not for everybody, but it's a time where their needs come first. They know that they can talk in a safe environment. And although they can be, people have real issues that they bring to that group, we also have a lot of laughs, and it's important to keep your, and it's all very well for me to say this, but to keep yourself positive and happy, and surround yourself with positive, happy people. And we do have a lot of laughs in there. If you didn't, you would cry, because some of the stories are so... The other day, this lady saw her husband trying to cut his toenails, and he was having great difficulty, and she went over and he said, "I just can't do it." But he was using the can opener. And if you really didn't laugh about that, it's quite tragic, isn't it? And actually, this same lady had another story about her husband. She couldn't make out why the hemorrhoid cream was getting down. Every time she'd go there was, and she went in one day and he'd been using it on his toothbrush. And it is, I know, it's dreadful, isn't it? But that's the whole thing. You have to laugh. You have to keep that sense of humour. So those support groups, as I say, they're not for everyone. But I'm in awe of those people, because they're the experts. Some of them were out there, and I thought they want to come and listen to me talk, but they really know what they're doing. I don't know what it's like to be a carer. I could only imagine how difficult that job is. And it's like anything, you don't know what it's like until you actually go through it. Carers don't have to manage alone. There are a lot of supports out there, but it's just accessing them and know what to do. And that really starts with the doctor. So I was just talking to someone out there before about some home help, and the doctor had advised them to go to WINS, but really, in actual fact, it's not through WINS. They won't allocate any money for housework. You have to get that support through your needs assessor at the hospital. And to make use of family and friends, and if they offer, take that support, they mean it. Christmas time and holidays are a really good time to use those people around you. There's lots of people there. Make sure you have that break as well. I've got a lady going away for her 80th birthday. They're going on a cruise, and her husband has moderate dementia. And I said, and there's 30 of them going. So I said, that's a prime time to be using those people to make sure that you have a rest as well. Of course, she's petrified he's going to wander at night and go overboard. Just keep positive, sense of humour, one step at a time. Don't worry about yesterday, it's gone, and tomorrow's going to come anyway. So just sort of focus on the here and now. And 90% of what we worry about never happens, so try not to worry too much about the future. I'd also tell carers that it's important to keep emotionally and physically fit. We sort of put the emphasis on these days to do exercise and to keep physically fit, but emotionally healthy is so important as well. To eat good balanced diet, which is just basic, but I think when you're tired and you're busy and you can't be bothered cooking, you grab easy foods that aren't always good for us, and to try and get a good night's sleep. If someone's wandering and you're up in the night, and this is a real thing. I mean, people get up and they get dressed and they think it's daytime and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, so it often takes time to manoeuvre that person back into bed, so it can be a very tiring, long day if you don't get that rest. So important for carers to look after themselves, or else they won't be able to look after the person they're caring for. Do you want to add anything, Roland, about stats or anything? Or?
You've done incredibly well, really.
Were you surprised?
No, you've done wonderfully well. I think I'd like to add to all the information that Julie has given you this morning by just passing on an observation of mine, or an experience of mine, with my Uncle Frank, who would have none of it that there was anything wrong with Marge. As far as he was concerned, she was just losing her memory, just a little bit of memory loss, no problems. And of course we could tell when we visited. She would say, I remember you. And yet he would say there was still nothing wrong with Marge. And so it went on. And he used to take over. He took over the driving. He was a control freak. He always did that anyway. But he took over paying the bills. He took over the housework. He took over to cooking, and Marge got worse and worse, of course, and ended up in care. And he would go to her every day at 8 in the morning and come home at 6 at night. And he would feed her, and he would hold her hand and sing to her and pray with her and tell her stories. And he would stumble home at 6 o'clock at night, and he wasn't feeding himself properly, and the place was a shambles, and yet he would say, you know, there's nothing wrong, I don't need help. And Marjorie died, of course, in the fullness of time. And 2 weeks after her funeral, Frank has a stroke. And he ends up in Beach Haven Hospital with 10% mobility, and after 11 months he's dead. Now what the hell was all that all about? I can understand the sense of love and duty and responsibility that makes carers do these things, but it makes no sense. And the biggest psychological shift a carer has to make is to put themselves number one. It is absolutely critical that you put yourself at the top of the list, and you go to the doctor and you feed yourself properly, and you get plenty of sleep, and you get plenty of help, and you put your hand up and say, yes, I need help. And keep a list by the phone of things that could be done, but you haven't time for. And when some of these useless people ring up and say, off the cuff, anything I can do, just let me know, you say, yes, as a matter of fact, I could do with 2 hours gardening. Yeah, be ready for them. Do you think?
I was just going to add to that guilt thing. We talked, because I knew I was giving this talk, and at my support group, I know I'm going on about the support group, but I've learned everything from those people. And I said, what do you feel guilty about? Because that carer support, like to put someone into care, we're only talking short time here, and it's just to recharge your batteries. And I said, what are you feeling guilty about? And often these people have been married a long time, and they've promised that they would look after them through sickness and in health, and they see it their job and their duty to do that. But if you think about, if someone goes into care, there's 3 lots of staff on board, so there's 7 till 3, 3 till 11, and 11 till 7. And when you're at home, you're doing 3 shifts. So you're doing the care of 3 shift workers. So that guilt, I don't understand it either, really, because like your uncle, if he'd looked after himself and didn't have he may well have. And the other thing is about that too, when people do go into care and that carer still goes in and feeds and stays all day, when that person dies, what do? Because they've got that identity that they are a carer, and they've often given up all their hobbies and interests and friends, and they've got nothing. So, and it's hard to get into something after that has happened.
I haven't encouraged questioning, because Julie's here for the rest of the day, and she's out there on her desk peddling her wares, and you'd love to have people come and talk to you, wouldn't you, at the desk? Yeah, that'd be really great. She'd really appreciate it. So please thank Julie for her little presentation today.